Alright folks, today we're going to take a deep dive look at this NanoVNA. It is the SAA-2N. So that means it's a version 2 of a NanoVNA, and N designates these N-type connectors as opposed to the SMA connectors that many of the NanoVNA variants typically use. So let's go ahead and get started. So before we get too far in the video, I did want to say that I was contacted by AURSINC, and they asked if I would review this NanoVNA, and of course I said yes because I like to do video reviews and I really like NanoVNAs. So it came to me in this box. Let's go ahead and open it up. Inside this box is this handy carrying case. It's textured to look like a carbon fiber, but it's not a carbon fiber as far as I can tell. Now, when you buy a NanoVNA, you should always make sure that you get one that comes with all of the components that you see here. It doesn't really matter on the model, but these are things that you're going to need. So let's just take a quick look and see what they are. The first thing are these test leads. The test leads are very important, and you want to go ahead and you want to use them. Now, this was in this package, this little stylus. I don't know if they all come with this stylus or not, but it was a nice thing to have included. Here we have a USB cable that we can use to charge the device or to connect it to a computer. I believe this is a micro USB cable. It might be a mini USB cable, I don't know. This is typically the stylus that you see come with these devices. It's like a little guitar pick and you click on the screen with it. I'm not a big fan of these. I prefer something like this. And then you have this lanyard that you can connect and then put your hand through like this, and that way you might not drop it. Now, this particular device did have a plastic bag on it, but I got excited and I took it out and I took the plastic bag off. Here is, I won't call it an instruction manual and I won't even call it an instruction pamphlet, but is a depiction of the menu system for the SAA-2. It looks complex and intimidating, but with use you can learn how to use this device and it's not too bad. Now, here is the other thing that you make sure you have included in any NanoVNA that you purchase. And these are your calibration standards. Here we have one for testing a short condition. We have one for testing an open condition. And then we have one testing for a load condition. And then you also have this barrel connector for doing through tests when you use these test cables, because this NanoVNA uses N-type connectors as opposed to some of the other models of NanoVNA. Oops, I'm hitting my microphone. Like this NanoVNA H4 uses SMA. So the test leads that came with this model have SMA connectors, and the reference standards are SMA standards, not these larger N-type standards. Now let's just go ahead and we're going to talk a little bit about SMA connectors versus N-type connectors. So SMA connectors, that stands for subminiature A connectors. And these are good for up to 24 gigahertz. Now these connectors are somewhat delicate and you need to be careful using them. They can be reverse gender. They use a smaller coaxial cable. And you really see them a lot on HT ham radios in the ham radio space. And you also see them a lot on Wi-Fi antennas. So you may have had some exposures to these. Now, as I mentioned, most of the NanoVNA variants that are out there use these SMA connectors. But now with the SAA-2, the N model, N stands for N-type connector, we see N connectors used more in lab test equipment. So these NSeries connectors, they were invented by a guy by the name of Paul Neal, and they're good to 18 gigahertz. Now, both 24 gigahertz and 18 gigahertz are far beyond any testing requirements that I have, and these NanoVNAs can't test that high either. Both of these connector types are appropriate for ham radio or amateur radio use. You just want to make sure that you do have adapters, because you will need to use adapters when using either SMA or N-type connector NanoVNAs. Like the SMAs, these can be reverse gender. They're very rugged, so they were originally designed for military use and are waterproof. Now, we're not going to test to see if this is waterproof or not, and we don't really need them to be waterproof because we're going to be using them in our test lab or ham shack. and they are primarily used for RF usage. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the NanoVNA itself. Here on the side is a power switch, so let's just go ahead and turn that on. And you can see that it quickly boots into the interface. Now, when we walk through this interface and do some demo stuff, we're going to zoom in a little bit so you don't have to worry about this being blurry right now. The first thing we want to notice are the two N-type connectors that are here. And then you have one labeled port 1 and port 2. The other is labeled channel 0 and channel 1. Why they have those different designations, I do not know. Next to that, you have a series of buttons, these 3 buttons. And you can use these buttons for navigating through the menu. I don't do that. That's not my preferred style. I like to use a stylus and then navigate that way. But your mileage may vary, and then you have both of those options available to you. Here on the bottom, you'll see some LED lights. These indicate the charge level of your battery and if you're charging or not. We have a product sticker. SAA-2N is the model that we have. Simple vector network analyzer. Frequency is 50 kilohertz to 3 gigahertz. The power requirements 5 volts USB, 1 amp max. Hardware version V2-2, and then we have a serial number. And this says made in China by Zenco. Avoid static discharge. We talked about the power switch. Nothing on this side. This is a metal chassis, but it's just bent metal, and I'm sure it offers suitable protection. The other thing is it has these standoffs. I mean, you could stand this up. I don't know why you would, but they're designed to stop anything from happening to your N-type connectors in transit or transport, or if you drop it or something along those lines. It is a 4-inch touchscreen, which is handy. It makes viewing this a lot easier. So I prefer the larger screen NanoVNAs, and it's most likely because I have bad old eyes. Okay, let's take a little bit of a deep dive into the menu, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to show how we can do a calibration of this particular device. All right, so hopefully this isn't a catastrophe. Okay, what we have here is a zoom in on my NanoVNA SAA-2N. So let's go ahead and turn it on. It's a little difficult for me to see exactly what's going on because of this configuration, so please bear with me. But when you turn this on, the device will recall anything that is in recall slot 0. You can save your own configurations there. So what we are going to do is we're going to walk through this and we're going to customize it a little bit. And then you can choose to save that configuration if you want. When I turn it on, you see that the start is at 100 megahertz and the stop is at 900 megahertz. So that means this is pre-configured for that span for a sweep. You also see 101 points. Now, if you were going to scan, let's just say 100 megahertz of bandwidth, and you had 101 points, you would have 1 data point per megahertz, give or take. With these devices, one of the things that you can do is you can increase your data points. You can go up to 201 with this particular device. So let's go ahead and do that first. Here I've activated my menu, and I want to go into stimulus. Now, stimulus is where you do things like set your start frequency. So let's just say we were going to start at 100 kilohertz. Down here, you can see that this has changed from 100 megahertz to 100 kilohertz. I can set my stop frequency. Let's just say we're going to stop at 150 megahertz. So now you can see the stop frequency has changed. And then I can go down here to configure sweep. When I turn that on, you see an option up top for sweep points. Now I can type any number I want in here, up to 201, and it will take that number. If I go above 201, for example, it's just going to default to its max value of 201. So what we've just done is we've configured a sweep to start at 100 kilohertz, sweep to 150 megahertz at 201 data points. Okay, another thing I want to do is go back and I want to talk a little bit about the display. So when I click display, I get a couple of options: trace, format, scale. Scales, you have a certain amount of squares here. So if I go ahead and I click scale, oops, one of the things I can do is adjust my scales per division. And I can set the value. I believe the default value is 10 counts per division, and I can move this up and down depending upon the granularity of the sweep that I'm doing. I'm just going to leave that as is. And I wanted to point that out just for reference. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to go back here and I want to hit trace. So your NanoVNA is capable of displaying 4 traces, and you can see them here in various spots. The active trace has a checkbox next to it. I can press and hold to make any trace active. When that trace is active, I can either turn it off, you see how it disappeared, or I can turn it back on. When it's active, I can hit back, and then I can go over to format, and then I can change the nature of my trace. I can make it for phase, I can make it for delay, Smith chart, SWR, whatever I want. When you look at this, your default traces here on channel 0, which is here, we have a logmatic reflection, which would show us return loss. Our green trace, which is actually trace number 3, trace number 2, is on channel 0, and that is a Smith chart, and that is going to be a complex impedance reflection back. Now I can change these like I just showed you. Our trace 1, I believe is what it is, but our blue trace is on channel 1 right here. And what this is a logmatic trace where we have a signal come out of here, go into here, and then we can measure gain or insertion loss. So that is what we are going to do today. We are going to do some through measurements. And then our last one is a channel 0 phase. The next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and we want to calibrate this device. Okay, getting those plastic things off was more difficult than I imagined it would be, but now they're off. So we're going to go through the calibration, as I mentioned, and what I would like to say is that many people will calibrate by connecting their calibration standards directly to here and to these ports, and that's fine. But when you do that, what you are doing is you're setting your reference plane to the end of this port. So anything you measure will be measuring from here, which could include transmission lines or anything else that you are adding to your measurements on your NanoVNA. What we're going to do is we're going to do a through measurement. So what we're going to do is we only want to measure our device under test, or DUT as it's called. So we're going to connect up these test leads. So we're going to calibrate to take into consideration these test leads, and it will zero out these test leads. So any kind of reactance or loss that is incurred by these test leads technically should not be part of our measurement. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to connect this. And now I'm going to need to connect my calibration standards to this device, or to this cable, right? In order to do that, I'm going to need to use this barrel connector. So what we've just done is we've extended our reference plane from the device to the end of this cable. Everything's moving around, and we're just going to have to deal with it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on my menu, and then I'm going to go over to calibrate. Now I can save my current configuration, which I'm not going to do yet. And my calibration will apply to everything that we've set up earlier. Our start, our stop, our data points, and then our configuration that we have here. And so what I want to do is I want to go to calibrate. And the first thing I need to do is I need to calibrate for an open condition. So I'm going to look for my calibration standard that says open. And now that I have that connected, I'm going to hit that. And then what's going to happen is a sweep will take place. You might be able to see a blue line going across the top of the device. And once that checkbox appears, that lets me know that that's done. So now I'm going to remove my open standard, and I'm going to connect on the short. The short standard is there. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click that. And it is performing a sweep. And now the short condition has been calibrated. So I'm going to remove this, and then I am going to go ahead and I am going to connect the load. And it is doing a sweep. And now that's done. The last thing I need to do is a through. So in order to do a through, I'm going to actually connect the second cable here. So another one. And then I'm going to connect this to here. And then that way both of my cables will have been calibrated or zeroed out. You can see over here that certain things have happened. We have an SOL, and that is for short open load. And that means that those calibrations have been performed. They have not been saved, or we haven't hit that done button. These will change color once that happens. Let's go ahead and calibrate our through condition. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit done. And then you can see that we are good from a calibration setup. Now, what I can do is I can save this here to any one of these. Let's just go ahead and save it to one. So that way I can recall this calibration at any point in time. Now, what I mentioned is that we wanted to do some through testing here. And so the way we do through testing is with our blue trace, which is running across the top. And this is a logmatic gain or insertion loss measurement. Because all of our connections and cables have been calibrated, we have a flat line that goes all the way across at 0 dB. And what that shows us is that there is no insertion loss there. We haven't lost anything because we've calibrated for any potential losses that may exist in this cable. So let me go ahead and I am going to connect up something that we can measure and see if there's any loss. And we'll be right back. Okay, we have a device connected in line, and this wasn't easy to do because I had to get a couple of adapters. So anyhow, from Surge Stop, we have the model M400X. It's a broadcast band filter. And what this does is it filters out any AM signals. Ham radio operators will often use this if they are getting interference to their ham shack or their base station radio from AM stations. What you can see is it can handle up to 200 watts. It's 50 ohm impedance, which is right in line with our calibration. And what it is active for 3.5 to 54 megahertz. And when I look at this, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. There's a bunch of stuff on here and it doesn't look exactly right. So a lot of times after you have everything set up and you do a test, you need to go in and you need to modify some of the things that you've set up already. What I want to do is I want to go back and I want to take a look at some of my display traces, for example. So when I take a look at this, I don't think I'm going to need the phase, which is the purple trace. So let me go ahead and turn that one off. So now it's not there. And I'm really not so worried about the reflection coefficient because I want to do a through measurement through the device. So I can go ahead and I can turn trace 0 off. And what I'm left with is my through measurement. And what I can see here is that my blue line no longer goes all the way across like it did after we did a calibration. It looks like it drops and then it goes up and then moves over. Now that makes sense because our bandpass, our broadcast band filter is designed to block lower frequencies, but I really can't see what's going on here too well. So let me go back and let me take a look at, let me go back one more and let me take a look at my stimulus. So if you remember, my stop was 150 megahertz. Maybe I'll just change this to 20 megahertz. Now I can see that this has shifted over some. So basically what we've done is we've zoomed in on what's going on. I can use the buttons on the side of this device to move my marker to get certain values at certain frequencies. So for example, we're measuring negative 5.83 dB. Marker 1 is at 2.985 megahertz. See, as I move that, my value for my attenuation changes, as well as my frequency. And this can move in either direction. Now, one thing I could do is I could go ahead and I could calibrate this again in hopes that it would better align my 201 data points. But I'm not going to go ahead and do that now. What I'd like to do next, we demonstrated this through, is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to connect this up to some software. There are two pieces of software that you can use with these devices. NanoQT, I believe, is one of them, and then NanoVNA Saver. And one of the things I'm going to mention is that I've got a pretty healthy playlist of NanoVNAs and doing all kinds of different things with these devices. I would encourage anybody who is curious about NanoVNAs to go ahead and check that out. There's one video in particular specifically on using NanoVNA Saver. So what we're going to do is we're going to just go ahead, we're going to connect this up to NanoVNA Saver, and we're going to do a couple of things, and we're going to talk about it. So here we are running NanoVNA Saver. And as mentioned, I do have a video that goes over this software in depth, so you can check that out. I do not have the device connected, but I am going to use the supplied USB cable, and I'm going to connect that to my computer. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to connect the other side to my NanoVNA. And once that happens, it should auto-detect my NanoVNA. Okay, now that my NanoVNA is connected and powered on, I'm going to come down to serial port control and I'm going to click rescan. And you can see that it automatically detects my serial port, COM3 SAA-2. And now I'm going to click connect to device, and then we should be connected to the NanoVNA. And you can see some measurements up on the display. The display of the device will change. It says SAA-2N USB mode, letting me know that the device is in USB mode. Now what we're going to do here is a simple sweep of an antenna, and then that way we'll be able to see how this application works, and you'll get some familiarity with how to do antenna sweeps or a single port sweep. Okay, so just like before, we need to configure and set up our calibration for the sweep that we want to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to come over here and I want to click this button called Sweep Settings. When I do that, I get a pop-up window that will allow me to configure a sweep. Down at the bottom, I can pick a band, and we are going to sweep a 2-meter J-pole antenna. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the 2-meter band, and I'm going to pad my band limits by 25%. This will allow me to see sweep measurements before and after the band. You can see that the sweep span is set for 143 megahertz to 149 megahertz, and that's perfect. I'm going to click this button, Set Band Sweep, close the dialog box, and then up under Sweep Control, I can see my settings have taken effect. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my NanoVNA is calibrated. So down here at the bottom under Serial Port Control, there is an option for calibration. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click that. Here you can see the device is not calibrated. So much like we did last time, we're going to run through the calibration, except we are going to do a single port calibration and not a 2-port calibration because we're not doing any through measurements. We're going to use the Calibration Assistant. So I click the button for Calibration Assistant. It says the Calibration Assistant will help you create a calibration in the NanoVNA Saver application. It will sweep the standards for you and guide you through the process. Before starting, ensure you have your open, short, and load standards available and the cables if you wish to have it calibrated with the device connected. It says if you want to do a 2-port calibration, also have the through connector to hand. We are not going to do that as mentioned. So I'm going to click OK, which is going to proceed. It asks me to connect the short standard to port 0, and I can do that. So I'm going to do that right now, and then I'm going to click OK to continue. Now I'm not showing the connecting of these standards because I showed that earlier in the video. It's the exact same process. So I click OK, and it will do a sweep, and now it comes back and it tells me to connect the open standard. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. And then now I'm going to click OK. Now that that's done, it's asking me to connect the load standard. And that's easy enough. The load standard is connected, so I'm going to click OK. It says the required steps for one-port calibration are now complete. If you wish to continue and perform a two-port calibration, click Yes to apply the one-port calibration and press Apply, which is what we are going to do. Now you can see in the calibration portion of this window, our short, open, and load are set at 101 data points. Let me go ahead and close this out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect my antenna, and then I'm going to go ahead and perform the sweep. Okay, and what's important to realize here is this is not a test of the antenna, which I quickly put up for the sake of this video. It is just a demonstration of how to perform the sweep. So with my antenna connected, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click the sweep button. And then you can see my sweep runs. Here I have some measurements along my Smith chart, and I have a graph down here for VisWAR or SWR. And I can see what my SWR readings across various portions of the 2-meter band. If I come over here to display setup, I can also change these charts to other charts, and I can see other data points. We're not going to go through those now. As mentioned, if you wanted to take a little bit of a deeper dive into NanoVNA Saver, check out my NanoVNA Saver video. With that, I'm going to say thanks for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. Thanks to AURSINC for sending me this device for my consideration. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or recommendations, go ahead and post them below, and I'll do my best to respond. Thanks again, everybody.